Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, individuals can have an impact on global issues with Jenny Davidson. We talk about what sustainability is, how pracademics are influencing society, and being happy in what you do.
Dr. Jenny Davidson has been working in the field of sustainability for over 20 years, working in senior public and private sector roles. After moving to the Northeast in 2013, she took on her first academic role at Newcastle Business School, becoming the Director for Learning and Teaching and MBA Director in the Corporate and Executive Education Department. In 2018, Jenny moved to work for Newcastle University Business School in the new Leadership Development and Organisation Futures team, working in partnership to integrate the university's world-class core strengths into industrial and commercial application. Jenny is first and foremost a mum to 3 boys, a runner, and, if she does say so herself, a pretty mean baker.
Welcome, Jenny, to the studio. So, why not kick us off? Give us a bit of we've obviously heard the bio, but tell us a bit about your journey, please.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Hi.
It's nice to see you both. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm not native to Newcastle, but I currently work as a senior lecturer at Newcastle University Business School, and I have a massive imposter syndrome as an academic. So for most of my career, working in practice, working in large private sector organisations, and had a brief period in public sector, working in the field of sustainability. So leading teams who are creating and implementing strategies to make organisations more sustainable. And then took the opportunity when we moved to the Northeast about 5 or 6 years ago to have a bit of a break and think about what I wanted to do next. And at that point moved into my first full-time academic post. And that's how I'm here.
Excellent. And how did we meet?
So Michelle and I met through the coaching network you were involved in, but through through the Northeast Hub for Women in Sustainability. So Michelle came along to one of our events, and the rest is history, as they say, Michelle. And then we keep bumping into each other
everywhere
at various things. We were obviously destined to meet, weren't we, Michelle? Destined to work together.
Yes, and we've randomly got people in common as well.
We have got people in common, but then that's one of the things I love about Newcastle. There's a lot of people who know a lot of people. I think it took me about 6 months to start to meet people that already knew people I'd met.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, that's very much what the podcast is, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I met Michelle at a networking event.
Uh-huh.
We're in the studio now. I'm still not quite sure how we got to this point. And then from just talking to other humans, we get a lot of great guests for the show. It's fantastic.
No, it's interesting stuff. So, talk us back. So, you mentioned you've got imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And actually, Jenny taught me a new word. It was the pracademic word.
The pracademic, yeah. I don't think I created that. I think someone else created it.
So, talk to us about that imposter syndrome.
Well, so I suppose it's wearing off is the good news.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose I don't think I see myself as an academic in the very purest sense. So one of the things I'm really interested in, and that I've done from both from when I was working in practice, but also from the roles I've had in higher education, is actually how you fuse those two worlds together. So several of the organisations that I've worked for, when I was leading teams of people, worked really closely with universities to kind of co-create projects, co-fund PhDs, and really working with higher ed to, I guess, create some space for thinking that perhaps you don't get as a practitioner. And what I get to do in my current role is that, but from the sort of university's perspective. So finding ways to work with organisations that fuse those sort of common objectives, but create something that wouldn't exist otherwise, if we were both working on them independently. So making that link between research and practice, and having research that's informed by practice and practice that's informed by research. There's often a bit of a gap between some of the academic work in the papers that are being written and what's happening in practice, and for lots of different reasons. And I think there's more we could do to bridge that, to really mutual benefit. And I'm particularly passionate about doing that around sustainability and around leadership for sustainability. So trying to make sense of some of the work that's going on within organisations, and then thinking about future direction for research and how organisations might use that.
A word like sustainability we hear quite a lot in the news. We see a lot about how we need to reduce plastic consumption and moving towards single use, and I see a lot more places with these paper straws. So the word sustainability it's a word I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, but it's something you think, I know what that means, but I don't. How do you sort of group that into a simple definition? So
there's lots of really great definitions of what sustainability and what sustainable development looks like. I think for me it's about balance and finding ways to move forward and to progress that balance those environmental issues with the social issues, with the economic impacts as well. And I think I'm making those as positive as possible. And the other thing I love about sustainability is the sort of is the time element, so the inter and also intra-generational part of it, so the guardianship for future generations, but also our responsibility now for others who are in different situations, in different, whether that's geographically or socially or demographically right now. So it's complicated and it's messy, and I think sometimes it feels very intangible, and understanding as an individual how you can have an impact on the plastic the plastic on an Indonesian beach can feel very disconnected. And actually the thing that fueled, I studied for my doctorate whilst I was working in practice at Heathrow Airport, and the thing that drove that was really about how to engage individuals in the agenda. And I've always been really interested in people and humans and how we interact with our environment, and I think how you engage people in such an interesting agenda that is interesting, absolutely, but can feel that distant, and in terms of both time, but also in our immediate world, in terms of our sort of what we're doing day to day.
Because that's, if you, as an individual, you might sort of think, well, if I stop using plastic bags, or it's not going to really make a difference to the world if I stop doing something, but it's the collective of, if we get 1 billion people thinking like that, then we won't have this hurricane or vortex of rubbish swirling around the Pacific and in other places, covering Hawaii. And I suppose do you think, where's the best place to start? Obviously, you're working with companies. I mean, you see a lot of work in schools to help change mentalities. How do you get individuals within an organisation excited to be part of an overall mission, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And if I knew the absolute answer, I'd be very, very
yes,
rich and popular. So I think... Well, there's two bits I'm going to answer, two ways I'm going to answer that question. The first is, in the team that I work in the business school, we're really interested much more generally in bringing together collectives of individual voices to bring about some sort of systemic change. So changing things at a macro level through individuals becoming a kind of collective in some way. And I think we've seen that happening very much in this, particularly in the environmental agenda, the environment bit around sustainability. And when I did my undergraduate degree in environmental management about 300 years ago, it feels like there were very extreme views around environmental movements. There was a lot of direct action and pressure group type movements. It wasn't mainstream we would talk about maybe 5% of the population in the UK being deep green, which means that you live and breathe those deep green values. And I think we've seen a massive change in that. And I think that's been a combination of perfect storms of sort of media coverage. We've got some great voices that are very mainstream who are talking about some of these issues. And I also think just the slow realisation more generally, therefore, that there's more we can do as individuals. So I think, but my research is actually not about necessarily the issues. It's about understanding how, as individuals, we can do the right thing, and how organisations enable people to do the right thing in the workplace, and what barriers they put up, and how they can. And that is very much on the assumption that most people want to do the right thing, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. I think most people, people don't go to work to do a bad job.
Well, quite, and actually, so I looked at moral development, and how people can be as morally developed as they would want to be at work. There isn't one solution, I'm afraid.
No, that makes sense. Where does that, in terms of an organisation, are you starting with bigger, say, FTSE 100, which have to set the tone, which government might impose some form of regulation, which then filters down into the mid-range to smaller business? Is there an ideal place to begin?
So when we talk about addressing those big global sustainability challenges, we talk about responses from civic society, governments and businesses. And I think there are some really great characteristics of businesses that are small, medium and large that mean they're really well placed to tackle some of these challenges. So, for example, international organisations, big international companies have and often have an infrastructure and a presence that is across boundaries. So they have in a way that any one government perhaps doesn't. So they have cultural know-how, they have infrastructure, they have resource across more than one country, more than one continent. And that's really important in the messiness of, it's not of sustainability. It's not geographically bound. It's a global piece. And I think, but at the same time, I think there's a big role for smaller and medium-sized enterprises, because they're important parts of those value chains. They are often sort of created and nurtured by people who are actually value. They're driven by their own values, their own passions, and I think harnessing that can be incredibly powerful. And also we see a lot of grassroots innovations around big sustainability challenges that are actually addressing things on the ground, that spring up into, that become small enterprises. So actually the solution is across all three. And for the region, for the Northeast, we have a lot of SMEs. So actually they're absolutely vital to the agenda for the region.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So how did you get here? So, it's just that kind of, did you know what you wanted to do when you grew up, or is it just kind of by a bit of accident, a bit of design? Yeah,
so I think I've always had a really strong sense of what I want to do, and whether that's been sometimes that's my actions have been unconscious, but I had a very strong sense from a very early age that, very idealistically, I sort of wanted to save the planet. Don't know where that came from. My family are very outdoorsy. There was a lot of, I lived in the countryside, but I just had a very strong sense. But I think I felt I was going to do that from a very, from a sort of ecology point of view. So I did one of the first environmental management undergrad degrees, and then to my horror, in the summer between my undergrad and I'd already decided I was going to do a master's, realised that what I was really interested in wasn't the habitat or the species management. It was I worked for 3 or 4 months for Rolls-Royce, one of their sites, implementing the environmental management system, and realised that it was the people that were really having this it was the humans that were going to be bringing about these changes. So I was, as I was working through, why isn't this management system working? Why can't I make it happen? It was the people that were stopping it or making it work where it was working. And that slightly horrified me, because I'd not really thought about working with businesses or in that world at all. So I went and did a master's in environmental management and business strategy, and and then carried on doing a very sort of, I suppose, quite a standard career for somebody pursuing that sort of path. So worked for a consultancy for a while, worked for a construction company, and then I went to work for Heathrow, and then I went to work for Oxford City Council, but did my doctorate along the way. And again, I think probably that was a bit of an indulgence, really. Just wanted to find out some more and about people and how they interact with and engage with the whole agenda. And then ended up in Newcastle almost by mistake.
Oops.
Moved here for my husband's job and took some time to really stop and think about what I wanted to do next, where I was in my life, and really liked the idea of revisiting some of my research.
Yeah.
So took the opportunity to go and work at a university, and I think I found that lovely mix of being able to indulge in the areas that really interest me, and also getting involved in some great leadership programs and doing some teaching that also really interests me. So I think there was a path in there. The Newcastle was a bit of a curveball, actually.
It's nice up here, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was a curveball only because we hadn't thought about it, but actually as soon as we came up here we were like, wow, let's not tell anyone else.
I'm a bit like that. It's grim up north. It's terrible.
Definitely. There's no beautiful beaches, there's no friendly people.
There's no gorgeous castles and countryside. It's awful.
No heritage, nothing exciting to see here.
The house prices might go up because of this podcast, so it's dangerous. Oh dear me. Okay, so talk to us a bit about your work at the university. So what is the aim?
So I am one of 5 people in a new team in Newcastle University's Business School. We are the Leadership Development and Organisation Futures team, and our remit is really to work with organisations from across the region and beyond, helping them to understand what the future looks like for leadership. So and we do that in lots of ways. So we do that by collaborating with them on projects, finding funding. We do that through delivering accredited and non-accredited programmes, so leadership programmes, bespoke programmes, and potentially we're also developing at the moment a part-time MBA programme. And we also do it through, creating spaces for people to come together and talk about issues that are important to them and find that collective voice with a view to sort of prompting some research and bringing about some policy changes, some systemic changes. And some of the sort of research disciplines that we work in are around gender. Obviously, I'm really interested in sustainability and responsible leadership. But we cover a whole plethora of work in terms of organisations, different types and I guess processes around leadership. And we that's what we do.
So you pretty much have got like carte blanche to just go mental a little bit, I think, haven't you?
Well, I don't know if that's how we would be describing it.
That's technically termed. I go mental on a daily basis.
I think what we've got is so the university has a really clear strategy around engagement and place, and there's a very clear direction about being very, very regionally rooted with this but with this potentially with this global outlook as well.
Yeah.
And so with colleagues, we've brought a number of projects with us, which have come about from the demand from people in the region. So they tend to all be centred around diversity issues at the moment. So we've got a North East Women Leadership steering group who come together, looking at how to attract, retain, and help to really realise there's potential for women leaders in the region. My colleague Nicola is working on gender and entrepreneurship in the region, and is starting very much with gender, but we're very keen to expand that out to other categories of difference. It's just that gender seems to have some real currency at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's in its sort of infancy, so we're scoping that out at the moment. And I run the North East Hub for Women in Sustainability, so that's a part of a UK network which has hubs across the UK and is run by Rhian Sherrington, who is based down in Bristol. So we've got different projects at different stages, and they're very much shaped by and for the people who come along. So we're not dictating what they look like and what they do. We hope we're responding to what's needed in the region and what the conversations are, and we're just the catalysts.
So really, kind of holding that space for that to happen.
Indeed, and creating safe spaces so that everybody's voice can be heard in a really constructive and safe way, and is equally valued, and we can see. They can see where actually they might contribute to some changes, whether that's through commissioning research or lobbying at policy level or whatever's needed, wherever the gaps are. Although I would add, actually, I think one of the things that's emerged across all three of those areas is this gap between the research and the practice, and trying to perhaps transition more of what we know from the research into practice and policy, and that's a really interesting process.
No, it is. It happens obviously in the world of psychology as well. There's so much really interesting stuff going on, but we're at the sort of coalface as practitioners, and quite often we don't hear about it. And it's like, how do you get the good research out of the universities and into kind of our hands, as it were?
Yeah. And I think actually creating time and space to do that is really important. And at the opposite end, having practice inform where the direction of travel for the research as well, I think is really interesting to me. I very early, or sort of midway through my career, I worked within an organisation where we always had a doctoral student in our team working alongside us on big strategic questions, and that was incredibly fruitful. And day to day, it was really fruitful, as well as the end of the project. So.
No, it's interesting because you are fairly unique in the fact that you have straddled both as well. Talked about that pracademic thing again. But we go to psychology conferences, and I'm sure it's the same in the sustainability world and the engineering world. You've got the university people, the researchers. They're finding new stuff, doing exciting things, and then we are dealing with actual end users, as it were, and it's kind of, there's a bit of an us and them. So how do you think we sort of break those barriers down?
Well, I think first of all, I'm not as unusual as you might think.
Ooh.
I think there's a few about that. So I mean, everyone in my team has had a foot in both camps at some point, and I think. So I think there are people around who have done both and who do both really well. I think it starts with, I keep coming back to the same thing, but actually it's becoming really important for our team, is creating some spaces where everyone can have those conversations and collaborate very genuinely all people are equal, and have safe conversations, safe and quite frank and honest conversations. So that's a lot of, and it's a lot of what some of my colleagues do very well is leading those sorts of conversations. So and then I guess it's about finding some common understanding, and just things like language can it's really simple, but we use terms and we use words very differently in different contexts. So I think language is probably really key. So creating some common language, common understanding, and identifying those gaps and how they marry up. So where are the gaps in the research and where are the gaps in practice, and what can we learn from each other?
No, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Are there any particular, say, in our listeners, any types of companies or people you'd like to chat more to within commercial sectors? Or
I think we're always really keen to talk to anyone about anything. I think what's emerging is, as a team, we've got a very clear set of values in terms of how we want to work. And I think any organisation that's open to talking about any of the issues that are relevant to, the future of work, and particularly in relation to leadership, is welcome to talk to us. I think we're probably a little bit challenging. So we're quite brave about sort of thinking quite critically and just being very. Well, I think challenging is the right word, actually. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's not a transactional thing. So we talk a lot about co-creating stuff. So we don't have a huge raft of off-the-shelf programs that people can come and we'll pick them for them. We're really keen to co-create stuff, whether that's research, contract research programs, collaborative spaces. So yeah, we're not. Whilst we do have some standard open programs coming up, we're not. We want to be creative with the people we work with.
That's really exciting.
It is really exciting.
It's like so many opportunities.
I mean, the main thing is it doesn't feel like work. I'm having so much fun.
No.
And I hope if you speak to our team, we just have this. Yeah, we just. It's really awesome. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think that's probably the most important thing, to just really, really be happy in what you're doing, for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that's the old adage. Fun work should be the most fun you have with your clothes on. My friend, who's a psychologist in Ireland, I normally do that with an Irish accent, but I didn't do it today. But yes, that's what he says. He's a psychologist. He's lush. But that's shout out to Dominic McCanny.
Thanks for the thought. Is that like the thought for the day? So profound, Dominic.
No, but it's that kind of, you look at the people are just desperate to retire.
Yeah.
And it's just like, your job is so awful. Like, you're so looking forward to retire. You've got 2 months left till you retire. Then what do you do next? Garden?
Yeah. I had, I think a lot of people are very miserable in their work.
Yeah.
And I had a bit of a sort of a pivotal moment, an epiphany, whatever you want to call it, after I had my first child, when I realised I thought I wanted to give up work in the first throes of parenthood, mm-hmm. and it became apparent that that probably wasn't quite right for me, and that I wasn't completely happy, and nor was everyone around me, more importantly. And actually my work was a big part of my identity.
Yeah.
But wanting to be at work and do it was incredibly powerful to me. So feeling like I could explore the possibilities of what I wanted to do at work more than I ever had before I had children really shifted my attitude to work and why I was there and what I wanted to get out of it and what I was doing. So I think that was I think that's something I've then carried with me.
Yeah.
So if I'm not happy, I change something.
No. Yeah. It's a really good way of doing it, I suppose.
It's in all of our gift to do that.
No, exactly. We have the power.
Absolutely. Yeah, having us more.
I think that happened with me as well. It's kind of, there's this gorgeous little bundle of cuteness, and I'm going to a job and I'm not massively into. It was the depths of the recession as well, so it was kind of, we didn't have a lot to do, so I was a little bit bored. It wasn't using me to my potential, and it's like, this is, I'd rather spend time with my little boy. So let's craft a career that's going to be, worth, spending time away from him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I think one's kind of ability to do whatever is right for you and to feel empowered to do that, to find the right balance and the right, the kind of the whatever the having it all is for you is obviously really important. But I think having that sense that you can do that and you can craft it yourself.
No, it's powerful.
It's very valuable, isn't it? I don't think that's automatic for everyone, but apparently work was important to me and it was a big part of my identity. It did make me happy. That was what I learned.
Brilliant. So the final question I think we've got for you today is, if you could go back to 18-year-old Jenny and give her one piece of advice, what would that be?
I think I would say to myself, don't be afraid to say no to things, and do just trust your gut instinct. I don't think I've really not done that, but actually it's felt quite risky at times or a bit scary.
Yeah.
So I think I'm quite instinctive, and I think that's been okay. So I think trust your instincts more, and part of that is sometimes just saying no to stuff. And I think not being afraid to say no, even when perhaps it might feel a bit like that means you haven't got a job, or I think being bolder would be okay.
That's a brilliant place to finish. So thank you ever so much for coming in to speak to us today.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode, when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.